For years, the United States and Canada dominated the liquefied natural gas market, supplying Europe with the energy it desperately needed. It was a golden opportunity, one that came at the perfect time as the European Union scrambled to cut ties with Russian gas after the Ukraine war. Washington and Ottawa rushed to fill the vacuum. Billions were invested. Massive contracts were signed. The future looked secure. But now, something drastic has changed. A silent but decisive shift has begun, and it's about to send shockwaves through the global energy industry. Europe is opening its doors. What happened? What triggered this pivot? And how will this impact North America's energy dominance? Stay with me as we break down the real story behind this geopolitical earthquake. To understand the significance of Europe's shift, we need to go back to 2022. When Russia invaded Ukraine, Europe faced an energy nightmare. Moscow weaponized its natural gas exports, sending prices skyrocketing. Panic spread as winter approached, with fears that homes and industries would be left in the cold. Then came the saviors US and Canadian energy companies offering liquefied natural gas at record-high prices. LNG tankers rushed to European shores, carrying the promise of energy security. But what many didn't see at the time was that this lifeline came with consequences. The US and Canada were not offering their gas cheaply. European nations, desperate to secure supply, were forced to sign deals at inflated rates. By early 2023, Europe was spending nearly 4 times what it used to pay for Russian gas. The shift was necessary, but it was also economically painful. Still, for American and Canadian energy producers, this was a golden age. Companies made billions. New LNG terminals were proposed, and policymakers in Washington and Ottawa celebrated their newfound leverage over Europe. But what they didn't expect was that Europe was already looking for a way out. For decades, the global gas market has been dominated by a few major players: Russia, with its vast pipeline network; the US and Canada, using LNG exports; Qatar, as the king of liquefied natural gas. But behind the scenes, new suppliers were emerging, and Europe was paying close attention. One of them was Norway, a country that quietly ramped up its gas exports to record levels. European nations, eager for a stable and close energy partner, poured money into Norwegian projects. Then came Algeria and Azerbaijan, 2 nations that had long been minor players in the gas market. They seized the opportunity, offering cheaper deals and long-term contracts. The European Union responded by fast-tracking energy partnerships with both countries. But the biggest surprise? The Middle East is making a comeback. Qatar, the world's largest LNG exporter, struck massive new deals with Germany and France, locking in energy supply for decades at much better rates than U.S. suppliers were offering. And then came the biggest shocker of them all, China. While the West was busy securing energy for Europe, China was quietly doing something much more strategic. Instead of competing for expensive American and Canadian LNG, China was buying up supply contracts from emerging players. Qatar? Beijing locked in a 27-year LNG deal, one of the longest in history. Russia? China expanded gas imports at discounted rates. Algeria and Iran? Chinese firms pumped billions into energy projects. Then China did something unexpected. It started reselling LNG to Europe. Yes, you heard that right. While the US was selling LNG at high prices, China, after securing cheap contracts, began reselling surplus gas to European buyers. By late 2023, Chinese LNG shipments to Europe surged by nearly 60%. The message was clear. Europe now had more options, and those options weren't just limited to American and Canadian gas. While geopolitics played a major role, the biggest blow to North American gas exports didn't come from foreign rivals, it came from Europe's own policies. In early 2024, the European Union announced a new energy strategy that would gradually reduce reliance on LNG imports from the US and Canada. The reasons? Cost. European leaders realized they were paying far more than necessary. Sustainability. The EU wants to hit its climate targets and sees LNG as a short-term fix, not a long-term solution. Energy independence. Europe doesn't want to replace dependence on Russia with dependence on North America. The most damaging move? The European Green Deal, which sets ambitious goals to cut fossil fuel imports by nearly 70% before 2030. To put it simply, Europe is actively phasing out North American LNG. This shift isn't just a policy change, it's an economic earthquake. U.S. LNG companies that invested billions in new terminals are now facing an uncertain future. Canada's energy sector, which had hoped to expand its LNG exports, is suddenly at risk of losing its biggest customer. Investors who bet on long-term LNG growth are now questioning whether they made a mistake. And here's the biggest twist. Europe isn't just reducing LNG imports, it's turning to nuclear and renewable energy faster than anyone expected. Germany, which once shut down its nuclear plants, is now reconsidering. France is doubling down on nuclear power. Wind and solar projects across Europe are accelerating. If this trend continues, North America could see billions in lost revenue, not in the distant future, but within the next 5 years. But here's the real question. Is it already too late for Canada and the US to turn things around? Europe's quiet pivot away from American and Canadian gas has sent shockwaves through the energy industry. Billions of dollars in investments, once seen as guaranteed profit, are now in jeopardy. And behind closed doors, the energy giants aren't taking this lightly. Emergency meetings are being held. Lobbyists are flooding Washington and Ottawa with urgent requests. Strategies are being rewritten. The question is no longer if North America's dominance in LNG exports is in trouble. It's how much damage can still be prevented. This is the inside story of the desperate moves being made to save America's gas empire before it crumbles. When the first signs emerged that Europe was pulling away, U.S. officials dismissed it as temporary. Europe needs us, they said. They can't replace us that easily. But as months passed, reality sank in. Norway, Qatar, and Algeria were taking over U.S. market share. China was reselling LNG to Europe at cheaper rates. The European Green Deal was accelerating the phase-out of LNG imports. By early 2024, panic spread across Washington. The Biden administration was facing pressure from energy giants like Cheniere Energy, ExxonMobil, and Tellurian. A series of behind-the-scenes meetings took place between top U.S. officials and European leaders. The message from Washington? Reconsider your decision. You need us. But Europe had leverage, and they knew it. The EU pointed out that US LNG was far more expensive than Qatari and Norwegian alternatives. They reminded Washington that the Green Deal wasn't up for negotiation, and they made it clear. If the US wanted Europe to keep buying LNG, it had to offer a better deal. This led to a shocking development. For the first time in years, US LNG exporters were forced to cut prices to stay competitive. Companies that had once profited from sky-high gas rates were now offering discounts, just to stop European buyers from walking away completely. But this was only the beginning of America's fight to keep its grip on the LNG market. While the US was busy negotiating with Europe, Canada realized it needed a backup plan, fast. For years, Canada had relied on exporting oil and gas to its southern neighbor. But now, with European demand shrinking, Canada faced an existential crisis. So Ottawa did something drastic. It shifted its energy focus to Asia. Canadian officials rushed to sign new LNG deals with Japan, South Korea, and India. LNG terminal projects on Canada's west coast were fast-tracked to make exports to Asia easier. And in a major shift, Canada began pushing for a direct energy partnership with China, the same country that had undermined North American gas exports to Europe. This was a controversial move. On one hand, China was the world's fastest-growing LNG importer. But on the other hand, growing tensions between Ottawa and Beijing made this partnership politically risky. Still, with billions at stake, Canada took the gamble. The question now is, will it pay off? Or will Canada become overly dependent on another unpredictable market? As governments scrambled to secure new energy deals, the real power players entered the scene. Big Oil. Companies like ExxonMobil, Shell, Chevron, and Suncor knew that North America's LNG dominance was slipping, and they weren't about to let their investments go to waste. So they deployed a three-pronged strategy: aggressive price cuts. Energy firms began offering long-term LNG contracts at discounted rates to European buyers, hoping to lock them in before they fully transitioned away. Pressure on politicians, oil and gas lobbyists intensified their influence in Washington and Ottawa, warning that thousands of jobs would be lost if LNG exports collapsed. Pivot to the Middle East. In a surprising twist, some North American energy companies teamed up with Qatar and UAE firms to co-invest in LNG projects, ensuring they would still profit from Europe's energy needs, even if the gas wasn't coming from the US or Canada. The message was clear. The energy giants weren't backing down without a fight. Despite the aggressive push from North America, Europe wasn't budging. By mid-2024, new long-term gas supply deals were already in place, and the majority of them were not with American or Canadian companies. Germany signed a major deal with Qatar, securing LNG supply until 2045. France deepened its energy partnership with Algeria and Norway. Italy and Spain expanded their reliance on North African gas. And in the biggest blow yet, the European Commission announced a bold new strategy. By 2030, Europe aims to cut LNG imports from the US and Canada by over 70%. This was more than just a shift in market dynamics. It was a clear rejection of North American dominance in the energy sector. For decades, the US and Canada dictated the global gas market. But now, a new era was beginning, one where Europe wasn't just a customer, but a strategic decision-maker shaping the industry. With Europe's doors closing, the future of North American LNG remains uncertain. Will US and Canadian gas producers successfully pivot to Asia, or will they struggle to compete with Qatar and Russia? Will Washington and Ottawa find new leverage over Europe, or is this the beginning of their decline in the global energy market? And most importantly, will North American energy companies survive this crisis, or will they face an industry-wide collapse? The battle isn't over yet. But one thing is certain, the global energy landscape will never be the same again. Stay tuned. The real war over energy has just begun. The battle for Europe's gas market has already reshaped the global energy order. The US and Canada are scrambling to recover. Europe is moving toward energy independence, but in every major shift, there are hidden winners, those who saw the changes coming and positioned themselves for massive gains. And then there are the unexpected losers, those who thought they were secure, only to find themselves caught in a storm they never anticipated. Europe's pivot away from North American LNG has created new global energy powerhouses. Norway, now the #1 gas supplier to Europe, surpassing Russia for the first time in history. Qatar cemented its position as the world's largest LNG exporter, securing long-term deals with Germany, France, and China. China, by reselling LNG to Europe at a markup, China transformed from a consumer into a major energy broker, profiting from the very crisis that others thought would weaken it. Azerbaijan and Algeria. Once minor players, they have now secured contracts that guarantee billions in revenue for the next decade. But it's not just countries that have benefited. Global energy investors who bet on Middle Eastern and Asian markets have seen massive returns. Meanwhile, European governments, by diversifying their energy sources, have managed to stabilize gas prices, a move that has boosted industrial production and prevented a prolonged economic downturn. But if some gained, others lost, and not just the US and Canada. While North America's gas industry has taken a hit, they weren't the only ones who miscalculated. When Russia cut off gas supplies to Europe, Moscow believed it had the upper hand. The Kremlin assumed that Europe had no alternatives and that Western sanctions wouldn't be enough to change the game. But they were wrong. Norway replaced Russian gas. LNG imports surged. Europe survived the energy crisis without returning to Moscow. By 2024, Russia's energy revenues had collapsed by over 50%, and China, its supposed ally, was now demanding even steeper discounts on Russian gas. What was once Putin's greatest economic weapon had become a liability. Energy companies in North America weren't the only ones caught off guard. Wall Street also made a miscalculation. Many investors poured billions into new US and Canadian LNG projects, expecting long-term European demand. But as Europe shifted away, these investments turned into financial sinkholes. LNG terminals that were supposed to be profitable for decades now face lower than expected demand. Energy stocks that once soared are now facing downward pressure. Private equity funds that bet big on LNG exports are now quietly trying to exit. This shift is already causing ripples across the financial markets, and it's only just beginning. But what about everyday consumers? Energy transitions aren't just about governments and corporations. They affect ordinary people too. For European consumers, the transition to new suppliers means that gas prices are stabilizing, and in some countries, even dropping. Industries that were struggling with high energy costs are now recovering. But for North American households, the impact is more complex. With Europe buying less, natural gas prices in the US and Canada could fall, a win for households, but a loss for the energy industry. However, Investors pulling back from LNG projects could slow down future energy development, leading to job losses in the sector. It's a trade-off: lower gas prices at home, but economic uncertainty in energy-producing regions. With the dust settling, a new global energy landscape has emerged. Europe is no longer dependent on North American gas. Russia has lost its energy leverage over the West. China has positioned itself as a global energy broker. North America must now pivot to Asia, or risk long-term economic losses. But the biggest question remains: is this shift permanent? Could the US and Canada still make a comeback? Could a future energy crisis change Europe's strategy again? Or has the balance of power permanently shifted away from North America? One thing is certain: the energy war isn't over. It's just entering its next phase. The global energy game is shifting faster than ever. What do you think? Will North America find a way to recover its lost dominance? Or has Europe truly moved on? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth analyses on the biggest stories shaping our world today.